in some ways, it does limit us. I mean, we can't put our experiences into language that would perfectly describe them in all of their sensory array to another person, right? But we can get them closer to the edge of what that is so that then they can step in and experience it themselves. And so I found, after looking at a number of different Western systems, Hermeticism was the one that I came up with because they have no dogma. They exist as a set of rules that basically what works, regardless of the tradition. If it works for you and you can make it work, that's great. Everything else you can kind of throw out, and you don't have to have a certain belief system or anything else. You can actually make these processes work. It's just a conditioning of your mind. And through your experience with a feedback loop, you put that back into your understanding and go deeper. And the process is endless.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today I'll be interviewing Brian Osborne. Brian Osborne has more than 40 years' experience in spiritual training, study, and practice, including Taoism, Western esoteric practices, and work with a North American roadman and South American shamans. His published courses include Aura Seeing and 4 Elements Manifestation. So before we get into our conversation, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into this direction and, a little bit of your origin story?
The nitty-gritty of the origins, right?
Yes.
Well, I've always had a fascination with this material, if we want to call it that, as a broad umbrella heading. From a young child, I grew up in a very rural area and spent a lot of time alone. I had siblings, but, we didn't live in a neighborhood or that type of thing. So we spent a lot of times in the forest. And very natural setting in upstate New York and in the mountains.
Where in upstate?
Right around the Lake Placid area. That range. Yeah. Yes. So very mountainous, if you know it, and sparse population wise. So, we spent a lot of time outdoors, probably more time outdoors than indoors. So we were sort of just in nature constantly. And so that allowed us a lot of time to not only have time to play with each other, but time to be on our own. And so I've always had that. It's never been a problem for me to be, in solitude or in those types of scenarios. So I think that lent itself a little bit in this direction because, I had experiences as a kid, very early on, all the way up, and just never had a vernacular to put around it, no words to really describe it other than my own experiences. So, but I was always fascinated by it. And when I decided to leave the area and go away to college, the first thing that I thought I would do would be to get a teacher, that was steeped in some tradition. I didn't know what that was exactly. I was leaning more toward, let's say, Asian philosophy in that territory, martial arts, those types of things, as a lot of young men do. And at that time, way back when, there were martial arts studios on every street corner.
Oh, I know.
I went to college in Boston, in the late 70s, and it was just the heyday for that type of stuff, right? So yes. I went around looking at just about everything I could get my hands on, and didn't really strike me as what I wanted. So I sort of gave up for a little while, just sort of surrendered to it and said, well, I guess when it's ready, it'll appear. And lo and behold, very shortly after that, maybe a few weeks went by, and I had stopped my search, and a friend and I were walking, a roommate in college, and he said, hey, look at that sign hanging out of that window. And it just was a very simple sign and said Kung Fu on it. And that was it. And I thought, I know every place here. I have looked at every single school in this area. There is no school there. It's got to be some college kid hanging a flag out his window or something. So, so my friend urged me to go up and take a look, and lo and behold, there was a center there. And so I knocked on the door, and my friend, being a good streetwise friend, and me being, literally the country mouse, never had gone out of the county. So being in the big city, when the person came to the door, was this very large Asian man. Then he, my friend just sort of turned around and walked down the stairs, and left me sort of standing there in this presence. And he finally just said, "Do you want to watch a class?" And up to that point, going to a lot of these schools, it was more like open arms, welcome, come in, do all these things. This guy was very gruff, very rough, and I said, yes. And he said, "Sit in this chair, don't cross this line, and don't say anything." Okay. So, I went ahead and did that. And as soon as I saw him teach and I saw what they were learning, I was like, this is it. This is the place. And so that's where my journey started. And so from that point on, I never missed a class. And, just one thing went to another, from martial arts to Asian theory and philosophy and medicine. And I mean, just everything the monastic lifestyle that he had was, arranged for me. And I just couldn't get enough of it. And that was the first place it started. And then things just jumped, as they usually do after a certain amount of time, and knowing what you do know, and especially what you don't know. I moved on to other teachers and other traditions, and started thinking, instead of in an eclectic way, what are the things that are similar around, all of these philosophies? And there were core principles that were the same. And so that really intrigued me. And so it started me on this process, and really trying to define as much as I could through my experiences, what it is that I was seeking, what I was trying to do. And then much later on, how could I relate that to people that were interested? And that's pretty much it. The rest is history, as they say. And I moved from that to a North Native American shaman who was a roadman, worked with, medicines, earth medicines, and then moved into South American shamanism. And I worked with, probably somebody that you actually know, Alberto Violdo, in the Four Winds Society. Mm-hmm. I worked with him for many years, and we did tours down to the Amazon, and helped with people down there in their becoming. And one thing led to another, and I thought, all of these things that I've engaged in so far have all been limited to me in some respects due to language and cultures in the language, as we know. So some of the nuances were difficult to pick up. So I decided to see if there was anything that was similar, or something that could bind all of those ideas together in a Western way, so that there would be no end to the study, or no end to, looking these concepts up and experiencing them, and being able to reproduce them, and then being able to actually explain them to people in common language, so that they wouldn't get trapped in, some of the language that we hold even to this day. It becomes very obscure if it's not our native language. So I think language is a prime, thing that, in some ways it does limit us. I mean, we can't put our experiences into language that would perfectly describe them in all of their sensory array to another person, right? But we can get them closer to the edge of what that is, so that then they can step in and experience it themselves. And so that's what I tried. So I found, after looking at a number of different Western systems, Hermeticism was the one that I came up with, because they have no dogma. They exist as a set of rules that basically, what works, depending, regardless of the tradition. If it works for you and you can make it work, that's great. Everything else you can kind of throw out, and you don't have to have a certain belief system or anything else. You can actually make these processes work. It's just a conditioning of your mind. And through your experience with a feedback loop, you put that back into your understanding and go deeper. Mm-hmm. And the process is endless, right? Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, well, it sounds like a wonderful exploration and an origin. So, yeah, no, there's a similarity in that the Sedona method has no dogma, and it's about discovering what you truly are and letting go of what you're not.
Right.
And we actually caution people against believing anything we say.
Always. Every one of my teachers has always said that.
Yeah.
It's probably one of those things that if you're truly looking for somebody to help you, I found that regardless of the tradition, I was very fortunate enough to get teachers that was practically their motto, right. Don't believe me, experience it for yourself, and then we can talk.
Right. Well, then we have at least some commonality.
Absolutely.
Although, especially the deeper the experience, or even when you go beyond experience, language really breaks down.
Of course. It's a necessary box so that we can get started, right?
Right. Well, yeah. We're having a conversation right now. We're using language.
Exactly.
We're not just doing sign language or.
It's true. I mean, we have to start somewhere, right? I mean,
yeah.
Even in Buddhist teachings, right? It's the same kind of idea, right? That we can only understand so much. And, one of my teachers said, not everything can be explained, but everything can be experienced.
Yes.
And so, I've kept that to heart through my life, basically. So
that's great. So I think you're somewhat familiar with The Greatest Secret, the book.
Yes.
So how does what you teach relate to that?
I think in some ways, I think at the core of the idea, it relates exactly. The methodology of getting there, I probably break into more steps, if we want to call it that. Mm-hmm. So for most people, I've found, again, this is just my experience, I found that for most people, there's that uplifting part of The Secret and The Greatest Secret and books like that, or any material like that, that's so intriguing to people because on a deeper level, they feel it intuitively. It's beyond just wanting it to be true. They feel the truth of it.
Yeah, there's some resonance.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but for me, I found that for myself as well, and probably just, maybe I was just a slow learner. It took me 40 years to kind of get there, but at the same time, I found that there are a lot more people like me in that respect. And that, sometimes the simplicity of it is almost too abstract for people, that a lot of people need, especially Western people, because we grow up in a place where, the methodology of how we learn things is ingrained in us. And it's, for the most part, a step-by-step procedure. Nobody expects a kindergartner to, understand spatial geometry, right? But at the same time, we put them through the steps so they can get to a point, if that's their proclivity, to go there and experience it. And I think the same thing with this. So what I've found from the traditions that I've studied and the way that I teach is that people enjoy the working at it. They enjoy, it would be nice to snap your fingers and be awareness instantly, and then your human experience will be done, right? Because you wouldn't have any challenges to pitch yourself against. You wouldn't have any.
Well, maybe, but that's possibly true. But isn't it also possible that recognizing that you are awareness is a great place to start. It's not necessarily a finishing place.
Oh yeah. I mean, let's say it's the context,
right,
of where we're starting. Right.
Yes,
but then how do we achieve it? How do we not achieve it even? How do we experience it?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, there are plenty of step-by-step techniques, procedures, places where we can go and measure so that, we know that we're not, I mean, the one thing that I think everyone could agree with is that time is the thing that we have in, somewhat limited supply, and that the worst thing that you could probably do, and this is a very Taoist idea, but is waste your time. Right. So it's like, because it's not something you can get back. And so you want to know, I think a lot of people in the West want to know that what they're trying to not achieve, but what they're trying to do is actually producing some effect that's positive in their life,
Oh, sure. Yeah. We're very goal and purpose and process oriented as a culture.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even as humanity, I think that we're very goal oriented, right? So I think that, my methods are, broken into segments so that, people can experience them, and the accumulation of that experience feeds back into, their study of it. And just that process alone drives them deeper. So instead of a full circle, I would say, it's more of a spiral, so that, as you get more experience, you apply that in the way that, you can understand it on a deeper level. And then through that next experience, you achieve even more. And then how to apply that in your life, I think, is that's another part that's extremely valuable. Because I think a lot of times with spirituality, if we want to call it that in general, is that, people tend to make it a part of their life and not their life. It doesn't always invade every part. It doesn't sort of assimilate in every territory.
Sure.
So I think there are plenty of methods that can be utilized to, kind of go through that, have these experiences. But then the real gauge is, how does it, make your life better? Basically, I mean, that's what we want, right? We want it to be what we want it to be. And everybody's idea of that is different, right? We're all fingerprints. We all have our own idea of what a perfect life would be, or whatever that is. And so how to apply these things and see that it is making your life better in every aspect. And, we break it down into 4, spirituality and success, or finance, if you want to count all of that together, relationships and health. So in those 4 general categories, how is your practice affecting those areas? And we all expect, I mean, anybody that's done this even a little bit expects some turmoil in the beginning. Anytime we go into something new, it stirs the pot, so to speak, so that all the debris starts to come up.
Yeah,
right?
Actually, yes, absolutely. We can sometimes feel like we're going backwards instead of forwards.
Absolutely.
And we forget that that's often necessary. Sometimes we need to break down the old in order to recognize the new, or even more than the new, that which is timeless.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we have to create space, right? So it's like, if everything's jammed up with all these things that we don't want, or things that we find, we don't need that experience anymore, or we don't need to be in the middle of that experience anymore, we have to make room for something else to come in. Otherwise, we're just jamming everything together. And if we are an infinite space that can be, that just has endless amount of hard drive space to put all this information in, then we have to have something that can pick out what experience we're looking for at the time. And I just don't know if most people have that amount of computing power, so to speak, on board, so it's like, it's a little bit easier to identify those things in chunks and break them down and sort of, achieve them a piece at a time and bring them into play, basically.
Yes. So can you give us an example of a chunk?
Sure. Well, I would break it into, three basic aspects. The first one is reference, so know thyself is probably the older term, right? Which is above the temple of Apollo, and so it was both a warning and admonition, to know thyself. And what does that mean in a spiritual context? Well, if we're going on a journey, we don't know where we're starting from. Somebody puts a bag over our head and drops us someplace. We don't know even our first step is in the right direction or not. And so we need to know where we are right now. One of my teachers would say we need to be brutally honest with ourselves about the aspects of our life. And this is one of the better ways I've found to do that, which is, just sit, quiet place, give yourself 5 minutes and just observe your thoughts. Observe the thoughts that come and go. You can let them go, just like many teachings say, they come up, they present themselves, and you let them go. And the next one comes in and let it go. And, most traditions that I've seen, the idea is that by doing that, it slowly diminishes the flow of thoughts into your conscious mind. And so for us, when we do that, because we're giving it a very short period of time to do it, we notice certain patterns when we come out. We write those patterns down. And, if we see like, oh, gee, I'm always, thinking about, I can't go a couple seconds without thinking about my checkbook, or I can't go a few seconds without this argument that I had with someone, or whatever it is, or my health condition, or whatever it is. And so it shows us a pattern of where our mind, spends most of its time during the day. It's constantly coming back to those things. And so the next step along that path would be, dissipation, or how do we clear that space a bit, And so there's a process that we use generally. There are a number of sub-processes below that, but basically called a burning meditation, which is a number of traditions have this. In fact, every tradition that I've studied has it, and I've not studied many that have it as well. And this particular model comes from the Tibetan Bon tradition. So, and it's basically how to burn off stress and mental fatigue. And so, but once you identify what that specific stressor or mental fatigue is, which is what comes up, in your observation of mind, and then you identify it or symbolize it with certain colors and certain patterns. And, through the same process, you burn that off. And so stress that's acquired through the mind or mental process is most readily taken out by the same process. And so, and this has a profound effect on most people. And it's a good starting place for that. And then, of course, we have a space, right? After that, if we've done it well, or in any way that we think we've done some. And so we create a space. And so what are you going to fill that space with? And so the third step would be, filling it with something that you desire, something that you want, process, more energy, or even a blank slate, to be able to, sort of tie your energy together without these other bindings being on there. So in a different configuration. So I find that those three processes are, really important. I mean, there's much more than that, but most of them can be put under one of those three headings. And there are many, many, many techniques. And so, I always remember one of my teachers saying, I'm going to give you this technique, do it. But if it doesn't work for you, don't worry. It was always a big thing. Don't worry, because there are millions of techniques and we'll find one that works for you. Right. So I think he had a good beat on, Western mentality at that time,
right. Hurry up. I want it now. I want it now. I want it now.
And also,
now.
And also just the idea that, we put a lot on ourselves to do it correctly, to get the result that we want. And
absolutely.
And it was another one of those techniques, I guess, or part of their tradition that they wouldn't tell you their experiences for the most part. until after you had had your own. Right, because they didn't want you chasing their experience.
No, yeah.
Which can be really frustrating for people. They don't think they get it right because it wasn't identical to the person that taught them. And it's like, no, nothing could be further from the truth. This is not that, right? It's
oh yeah. It has to be authentic for you. Otherwise it's,
of course,
it's
again,
just mimicking.
we have our life experiences, right? We're all fingerprints. So, our ability, or our mind's ability, our subconscious ability to, culminate all of those experiences and then push them into, something that you're manipulating with your mind, practice of some sort to come up with some other experience. That's a big deal, and very private, very, very personal for each person, So, yeah. So I've always followed that as well, that it's, I'll give hints about the signposts along the way, but not the actual experience itself, what that's supposed to entail for them.
Sure. Yeah. And again, if it's an experience, it's limited in time anyway. It's just it's just a piece. It's not the whole thing.
Exactly. So, yeah. So that's pretty much the process. Without going into all the techniques, but I'd like to go over one anyway.
Oh, please.
So that people,
I love that. I always ask everyone I interview if they have something they'd like to share from their tool chest. If they have a tool chest, many of them don't. They're more direct path or no path teachers as opposed to the gradual path. But yeah. What do you got?
I would say this one links pretty closely to The Greatest Secret.
Sure.
As far as experiencing awareness, it's just more of a step-by-step process.
Sure.
And so traditionally, they would start with a completely dark room and with one single candle lit. You're sitting in front of that candle. And then either with the candle still burning, relaxing the body. And, a little bit more advanced technique would be to put the candle out completely. So you're sitting in a completely dark room and in a comfortable seated position. And then you just state out loud, I have a body, but I am not this body. And there's a pause and a gap and space. And then the next thing is, I have thoughts, but I'm not my thoughts. And a pause and a space. And I have emotions, but I am not my emotions. Pause and space. I have a mind, but I am not my mind. Pause, space. And then singly, I am. With a bit longer pause, see how long you can stay in that place. And then finally, I am I. And again, sit for a minute in that space. And that's it. It's a very simple practice. And one of the things to look for is, I always find it interesting when you get to the place where I am with nothing at the end. There's a bit of discomfort that comes up for a lot of people at that point. It's like waiting for the next identifier.
Yeah, we're habituated to adding something to the end of that statement. Yes.
And it's a true, it's like a true indicator, where am I along this path, so to speak? And, how comfortable can I be in that nothingness, and everythingness at the same time, right?
Yes.
So, and then when I come back with the I am I, things seem to like a chord in a symphony that then resolves, and so you feel this sense of, oh, okay, that's much better. Right. So that's one simple practice that people can do to sort of bring themselves closer to that spot, at least within the greatest secret that, am I aware?
Right.
This is just like a peeling off of those layers one by one, sort of resting in them, seeing where the friction is or not.
Or not,
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like fun. It's something you could probably do, though, without the dark room, without the candle, couldn't you?
Oh, sure.
Couldn't you just simply,
sure.
eyes open or eyes closed, just focus on those statements and just see where it leads you?
You can. It's the idea, I think, is more akin to almost as close to some type of sensory deprivation tank, if we want to use a modern term, right? Where it's like you're removing anything that could draw you into something, right? A space,
Sure.
a light, candle. It's amazing how many people, even lifelong meditators, that have a difficulty meditating in a dark room. I mean, a completely dark room, with no light coming in and no sense of where they are, what's going on. Because, when we meditate with a source of light or anything like that, a lot of people, they'll close their eyes and, but if something disturbing comes up, you open your eyes. It's a natural response, right? And so, but when you do that in a completely dark room, you're still left where you are, right? There's really nothing there to give you a sensory array of, what you experienced is not so, right? And so it sort of drives the practice a little deeper.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. But it's interesting the response that people have as well, right? And it should be interesting to each of us, our own personal response.
Yes.
Yeah. It tells us a lot about ourselves. And again, that's part of that first stage of know thyself, right? Which is it's a constant movement in that direction. It's a practice that we never give up, because we're constantly changing, right? All of our experiences, our life experiences, they change us in every moment. We sit down to meditate and we know that we'll be changed before we get up.
Sure. So does any of your practices focus on that which never changes?
Which is awareness?
Well, you could call it awareness, or you could call it empty fullness, or you could call it beingness.
Like, are we talking about the one infinite intelligence?
Yeah, you could call it that too.
Yeah. We usually use the one. It's just an old simple term, but thinking that all of us are aspects of that one, all of the, I usually tell students we're the POV of the one, it's like, we come down here to, so that the one can experience itself, right? As if we look at the old stories and some of the old traditions. So in that respect, yeah, we do. They call it open focus meditation, which you may be familiar with as well. So it's like, again, and the counterpoint of being able to focus completely on a single thing, whatever that is, a sound, a sight, whatever it is, and then what is the space around that thing? How is it, impacted by that? How does it resonate out into that? And all of the things, the point of culmination of this energy, this thing, whatever it is that we're focusing on, is just an outcropping of that energetic substrate, if we will, frequency, vibration, whatever term is most comfortable for people. When we look at it that way, it tends to bring a little more sense to all of this, I think. Just because it doesn't deny either the thing or the space. It just gives them two sides of the same coin, basically. If all of this that we're experiencing is an outcropping of the one thing, then it makes more sense that we're just having an experience, right?
Right.
And we can make of it what we want. We can suffer in it. We can go beyond it. We can make it into something else.
Yes.
And that's it. That's very free flowing. That substrate is, there's nothing that it isn't. There's nothing that it can't penetrate. We're all part of that, right? So
yes.
It makes it a little easier, especially I think in distressing times, to really bring that to focus, right? It doesn't keep us from feeling, greatness or suffering or anything else. It's truly an experience that this specific aspect is having, and relaying that instantaneously to the one, right? Mm-hmm. So that it can experience itself through me. I've always said to students, I have one fear that I constantly try to move beyond, and my whole life or practice life has been around that, which is, you pass on and you end up in a room. This is my image. You end up in a room on a couch, and there's the one sitting there, and he's just looking at you and saying, I gave you the keys to the kingdom and you sat on the couch. And I'm like, I am not going to let that happen. Okay. Well, again, I'm engaged 100%.
Yeah. In my experience, Brian, you're very much how all of us are programmed. We're all programmed to think we have to do and accomplish and become more. And that is just kind of a universal programming when it comes to the person.
Yeah. Where does the programming come from?
Well, it comes from that empty fullness.
Exactly.
And it returns there too.
Exactly.
And it actually doesn't leave.
Right. So all we can do is modify the program, right?
Right.
And, and utilize that to the best of our ability. I think it's that creative nature in us that drives us forward. Once we have that understanding, or at least that idea, then it's like, how can I engage this in the best possible way? And and all of us are a little bit different from that, right?
No, totally.
Like, so it's for me, and at least the people that have, gotten something out of, what I teach, is that, they're doers, and they embrace the doing, and they get a lot out of it, and it enriches their life. And with every experience, it gives them more of the experience of the one. And so, and I think it's just, my steps are more incremental instead of just jumping right into that.
Sure.
And I don't know, it's kind of, I've always tried to make the case that, engaging in a personal spirituality is no different than engaging in anything else that we've done in our lives. When we when we set it up with two different models, it becomes something hard to, encapsulate. And it's like, we don't have to. We're readily geared for this. It's like, you just have to have the desire to engage it and really bring it to life. So for me, that's been an overwhelming drive since I can remember, even as a kid. So it's that's a big deal. And for me, again, learning it as I've learned everything else, one step at a time, just makes good sense to me.
That's great. No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So do you have anything else you wanted to leave people with, either a thought or a process?
Sure.
Or something you'd want to challenge them to do over the next period of time?
Yeah, I would say, as far as a challenge goes, I would take 7 days, take a week. And so we, not that I want to go and dump a bucket of ice water over my head for, that type of challenge, but this is one that's a little bit more internal, where you'll see benefits very, very quickly. So at least the traditional way to start this would be start on the actual day of your birth. So if you were born on a Monday, meaning the day of the week, not your actual birthday, right? So day of the week, they consider the day of your birth. So that's sort of the start of your week. And so you'd start there and then end the day previous. So, and when you do that, it sort of takes your personal natural cycle, and sort of engages you in an energetic flow that's natural for you. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a boost when we put into the mix this timing. It actually has a little bit of a push to it. Mm-hmm. So when I first start with this, I go, and I think some people will probably have already done this practice. It's the centering prayer, I think, in Christian tradition, mm-hmm. Where they use the word Christ. In our case, we use the word awareness. Mm-hmm. So, but you could do it with almost anything, right? And so the idea is, the centering prayer or the centering process is, again, quiet, still your mind as much as possible, relax your body so that your energy is moving more efficiently and more fluidly, and then stay, in this case, awareness above me, awareness below me, awareness in front of me, awareness behind me, awareness to my left, awareness to my right, awareness within me. And that's it. It's a simple practice. If you do it when you first get up in the morning, whether it's in bed or out of bed, if you do it sometime around the middle of the day, and then sometime in the evening before you go back to bed, 3 times a day for 7 days, and see what kind of impact that has on your life through the course of your normal routines in the day.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very nice. And, people, much like with Rhonda's practice of, am I aware? Yes. It's simple, it's easy, and it has a profound effect on just about everything that you do throughout the day. So, and you should notice a difference in some way, shape, or form, which is really great. Some people feel it right away, and others it may take a few days, but consistency is the key, right? Because we're still uploading our mind with what we want, and most people want to have a deeper connection with that presence, with the one. Mm-hmm. And if we're always moving in that direction, it's can be a long journey, but at the same time, every step brings you some new discovery. And I think that's the essence of it. For me, it's loving this life and engaging in it fully, and finding the one through those experiences.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Brian Osborne. You can learn more about Brian at 2besilent.com. That's the number 2 and the letter B, silent.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you'll have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levinson's work, and the Sedona method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's sedona.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.